Hi, I'm Ryan with RhymeJoe Codes, and in this video we're looking at part 2 of the VLOOKUP function. In part 1 we talked about how the data should be structured and we gave an example of how to use it. Here we're going to dive into a couple of more examples, so let's get started. For us to use first name as our search key, we need to make a few changes to our functions. So let's just go ahead and change our search key to a first name, and we'll use Brant as it is our first name. And so of course the first notable change will be in our range, because the VLOOKUP function wants to look down the very first column. It's going to. So this changes our indices. And again, these are just for reference, but I want them to be accurate. So let's change those. So now we're looking down column E, which is index 1, F is index 2, and all the way to K, which is index 7. Let's go ahead and get rid of these functions, and we're just going to start from scratch. So I'm going to start with first name, and again we're going to look for our search key, which is going to be right there. We're going to go ahead and make it absolute by clicking F4. And then our new range, like we said, is going to be E3, because that's where our row starts. And we're going to do through K. Go ahead and do F4. And then we're returning the first name, which is index 1. This column is not sorted, so the only option we have is to choose false. And so this is what we have. We can copy this down. We can change our indexes like we did before. Now what you may notice is that our ID is not in there. But surely everything else is working. Now this is only going to return the first value in that column. So if there's repeats in the column, then it's not going to return all of them. It's only going to return the first value, because once it finds a value, it quits looking for that function. So I haven't mentioned that yet, but that is a part of the VLOOKUP. It only returns one value. It does not return multiple values. So what do we do about our ID? Because if we copy up our function to our ID, how would we change our index? Because we know that column D, which is where our ID is outside of our range of E3 to K. And so it's on the left side of the range. So, I mean, could we just do 0? Well, no, we can't, because the VLOOKUP function expects parameter 3, which is the index, to be greater than or equal to 1. So there may be a few workarounds here. One that I've found works is to use the match, and match also uses a search key. So we'll use our same search key. We're searching in column E, which is the column with our first name, which is where our search key should be found. Instead of starting on row 3 though, I'm going to keep it the entire column because I want it to start on 1. And so what the match does is it's going to search this column, and if it finds the first name, our search key, it's going to return the row. Now, if I started this column at the 3 row offset, it would move the row that it returns by 3. So I want to start on row 1 in this column and have it return the accurate row for me. So now it's asking for a search type. If I look at my optional search type, I can see here that it tells me if I type in 0, then the match will find the exact value when the range is unsorted. And as we discussed, the first name is definitely unsorted, so we're going to use 0. So we look for Sandra. Sandra's here. My ID is 7, but my row value is 9. So what I want to do is come over here. I want to use this row, but I want to return column D. So one way I can do that is to put this inside of another function which accepts a string for a cell value, and it returns what's inside the cell. So what column are we looking for? Well, we're looking for column D. I'm going to type that in as a string. I'm going to use the ampersand sign, which means to concatenate or to put two strings together. And so we're going to put the D with the row, and that's going to give us an A1 notation. So I'm going to make that true, and it's going to return to us our ID from this cell. So what is it doing? It's concatenating the D and then the row number that we give it. So in this case, it's a 9. And so it searches for D9 and it returns it for us. And so as we move along, we can see, we can do some examples and it changes with us. All right, so that's how we do the first name. Next, let's look at combining a couple of names together so that we can be more specific on which name we're looking for. So let's say we want to look for a first name and a last name. How could we do that with VLOOKUP? Well, first we want to create a helper column. And what that's going to do is we're going to combine the first name and the last name. We're going to use the concatenate with the ampersand to make a new string that has the first name and the last name without any spaces. So it's going to look like that. We're going to copy that down to all of our cells. As we add new columns, this will automatically generate in this helper column. Now what this will do is it'll make our index of our range change. So let's adjust that. So now we have column C as the beginning of our index, and it becomes index 1. It's the beginning of our range, rather, with index 1. And it goes to column K, which is now index 9. So let's just take the record that we have, and we're going to have two search keys. So we have first name search key, and now we have a last name search key. So how do we do this with a VLOOKUP? Well, what we want to do is we can actually do it with an ID now. We don't have to do any tricks for our ID because the ID column is now within our range. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in VLOOKUP. We're going to go for our search key. It's going to be B1. We're going to go ahead and make that absolute. And then we're going to do our ampersand sign. And then we're going to add B2. And we'll make that absolute. And now we're going to look at our range. So, well, let me back up. What did we do different? We just added a second cell. And we mirrored what we did in this column. So we have B1, the information from B1, which is the first name. We have an ampersand, which means to concatenate or to make a string out of B1 and B2. So if you look at this pattern, it's the same pattern that we had in our helper column right here in column C. So now let's create our range, which is C3, and it's going to go to K. We're looking for an ID, and now our ID is index 2. And since this is comprised of our first and last name, we know that it is not sorted, so we only have the option of false. So now, since we have this, let's make our range absolute, and then we can copy it down. And now I'm changing the indexes to match the return column that we're looking for each one of our labels on the left. So now it requires a first and a last name to get a match. So we have this right here. So there you go. That's a couple of examples of how to use the VLOOKUP function. I hope you learned something. And there are a lot of applications for the VLOOKUP, so have some fun with it. And I'll see you in the next one.